We're back on and welcome back to the Torah portion, week 43, Massei, double portion, but we're just really concentrating on Massei today. Shabbat Shalom. If you're just joining us for the first time, we've got stacks of people here on the Zoom lounge. God bless you and thank you for joining us on the Torah portion. Now we're going to really launch into, after that fairly long, you'd think, oh gosh, we just read through that last section, but in actual fact, if you take it through and look at the foreshadows, it can be quite a wonderful journey through a very short chapter, skeleton chapter, really. All right, well, let's look at them. They've come to, the children of Israel have journeyed for these 38 years, plus the 2 years, 40 years. They're in the plains of Moab, spread out from Beth Jemeshoth to Abel Shittim, which is what the scripture says there in verse 50, that the Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho. And it's this camp, it's quite astounding to me that the description of this camp is only 12 miles, so like 18 kilometers. 2.5 million people seem to be, now I understand, in a city, a modern city, people have 4, 5, 6 bedroom homes, suburbs and well laid out streets. But I suppose in tent city or booth city, that this would fit in that sort of 18 kilometer range. But that's along the river there. They seem to be camped in this big area. Rabbi Bar Hana says, I've seen this place. It's 3 parsangs, approximately 12 miles in extension. Rashi says the plain of Shittim, the acacia trees is what it translates as, was called Abel. This teaches you that the extent of Israel's camp was 12 mil, equaling approximately 3,500 feet, because Rabbi Bar Hana said, I myself saw that place being 12 parsangs, 12 miles square. 12 miles square. It's only 18 kilometers square, 2.5, let's say, million people in there. Quite a miracle. And from the border of Moab, they entered the Amorite territory. We tracked this the last couple of weeks, made war with King Sihon and King Og of the Amorites, journeyed across King Balak's territory, and then through the mountains of Abarim, before Mount Nebo, the plains of Moab opposite Jericho is where they settled. King Balak of Moab, we read this a couple of weeks ago, summoned Balaam, the prophet, to curse them, got up in 3 different places and looked down on this 18 kilometer by 18 kilometer camp and tried to curse, but couldn't curse. Blessings came out instead. He predicted the success of Israel, the rise of the King Messiah, the star from Jacob and the scepter of Israel. And there on the plains of Moab, the Lord spoke to Moses and told him to tell the people of Israel that you shall take possession of the land and live in it. All right, that's verse 53 of Numbers chapter 33. And he said, for I've given the land to you to possess. And so the end of the journey happens in the Moab plain. The Lord told the Israelites to prepare now. Come on, guys. Get ready to cross. We're going to cross the river and take the land of Canaan. He warned them to drive out the inhabitants, completely destroy their mode of worship, of demon worship, and destroy their temples, smash their idols, destroy their high places. Are you getting the picture of what type of war this is going to be? It's called a mitzvot war, which is a command war. And the commandment war, as opposed to a discretionary war, involves everybody, and there are to be no survivors. This is a survivalist sort of conflict. And after conquering the land, the Israelites are to divide it amongst the tribes, and then they're to settle there, and they're going to possess it, and this will be the fulfillment of the Abrahamic covenant in the physical sense. Now, here's a fact. Up until 1948, the Jewish people were not in that land. And so what do you think they did? Did you know that other lands were considered for them to come and live in as the nation of Israel? They considered places in northern Africa. I remember reading about this, but there's been several places. But What do you think? Would it be right if they'd settled in Liberia or, Ethiopia? Or that's now the new land of Israel, Ethiopia. That's just doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute. But they were thinking of this and, well, how's this going to happen? We're not in the land. Turkey had the land at the time, or prior to that, the Byzantines, but prior to that, the Romans. We're not in the land. What do we do? So they considered other places. But even though they've considered other land, the Jewish people have no homeland other than what? The one that God gave them. And the Bible makes them responsible for that land. And the Jewish people's right to live in Israel and possess that land is, of course, to this very day challenged by all the nations of the world. Not all, but many. And the global opinion has repeatedly condemned the state of Israel for their occupation of the land. A great majority of the Middle East does not still recognize Israel's right to exist. And the majority of the world does not recognize Israel's right of ownership over the territory that they're currently in. And unfortunately, in 1948, they came in and it became the state of Israel. Rashi says, and this is, by the way, Rashi Genesis chapter 1. This is not the Rashi of this verse, but it goes back to Rashi Genesis 1. The Torah should have begun with the verse, "This month shall be to you the head of months," which is the first mitzvah commandment to the Jewish people. Why does it begin instead with, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth"? It doesn't relate to Israel back then. It's related to this God. This is an announcement. God created the heavens and the earth. But it should start with, this is the first commandment to the nation of Israel, because this is about Israel. But this is what Rashi says: he's made known to his people the power of his works in giving them the heritage of the nations. If the peoples of the world say to the Jews, "You are robbers, illegally occupying a land that belongs to other nations," Israel can reply, "The whole world belongs to the Holy One, blessed be he. He created it. He can give it to whoever he wants. It was his will to give it to the Canaanites, and it was his will to take it away from them and give it to us." That's the Rashi statement there. The reason that the Lord wanted the Canaanites out of the promised land was because, firstly, they were idol worshipping and an immoral nation, and the Lord was moving them out to move his people in. And they could remain in it as long as they didn't worship idols and enter into immorality. Secondly, God had given the land of Canaan to the descendants of Abraham in accordance to his covenant with Abraham. And so I have read, and someone might like to go into this more detail, but it should be noted that God gave the land of Israel to Shem. So Shem was the son of Noah, Shemites, where the word Semite comes from. He gave the land to Shem, but we find that Canaan came in there, the son of Ham, instead of Shem. And at some point, that land transferred from Shem to Canaan. So there is an indication there that that land had been taken from Shem, or the descendants of Shem. The exile from the land in the mid-first and early 2nd century, so, at the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, there was a first massive exile of the Jewish people out of the land. And then in the year 134, there was the final exile after a bit of a revolt by a false Messiah called Shimon bar Kokhba. And these two exiles had left the Jewish people scattered all over the world. And only in the last century has it been possible for them to return so as to keep the commandments of God of living in the land. So the prophets foresaw this exile would end one day. And in Jeremiah 16:15 says, "The Lord lives, who brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north, from all the lands where he had driven them, for I will bring them back into their land, which I've given to their fathers." And we know that in 1948, State of Israel was reestablished. Jewish people had the opportunity to come home, and millions have made aliyah. We've been involved in it. You've been involved in it. We've raised money for it. The Lord is bringing the Jewish people back into the land. 3.5 million plus people have come back from around the world through the aliyah process. and it's set. It's getting ready here for the return of the Lord. In the days of the apostles, 4 sages set out on a long journey to Gentile lands. They came to the port of Sidon, made ready to travel on a ship, but then they remembered the land of Israel. A yearning for their homeland overtook them. Tears filled their eyes and their garments. They quoted the verse from the Torah that says, "You shall take possession of the land and live in it, for I have given the land to you to possess." They turned around and went back home to Israel by the same way they'd left, saying, "The command to live in the land of Israel is as weighty as the commandments of the Torah." So it's important to know that, a very great number of the commandments that God gave to the Jewish people can only be fulfilled within the physical boundaries of that nation. If you lived outside that nation, they can't be fulfilled. So there is a very great importance, and there was an impetus on the plains of Moab for the children of Israel to get across that Jordan River. Should have happened 38 years earlier so that they could begin to fulfill the Torah commandments, but there's this urgency to get across in the land so that they can fulfill it. And whilst the children of Israel are not in the land of Israel, the Torah commands, many of them cannot be fulfilled. And so there's a sense in which there's unfulfilled commandments. We need to get back there so we can do it and lead the full Jewish life. And so there are many commandments in the Bible that don't apply to people living outside Israel. If a person thinks of each commandment as a special privilege to serve God, then he will want to do as many of the commandments as possible. Therefore, the best possible place for a Jewish person to live is in the land of Israel, to fulfill as many of the commandments as you possibly can. Jewish believers in Jesus, this is a fact, do not find it easy to return and live in the land of Israel today. It's hard to get back in if you believe in Jesus, even as a Jew. Messianic Jews who apply for citizenship in the modern state of Israel are often rejected because of their confession of belief in Jesus. And that's a fact, and we've worked through that, and the law of return just seems to have a natural rejection for those Jews who are genuinely Jewish, who have a belief in Jesus. So it's hard for them to come back in. Many do. Many come to know Jesus within the land of Israel, but to get back in is quite hard. And that's an issue of prayer, because every Jew in their heart wants to fulfill as many of the commandments as possible. All righty. Let's, any questions as we move on to the borders of Israel? Any questions? Right. Let's go. Now we're going to be reading chapter 34. So let's have someone read that. We're going to be looking at the appointed boundaries, and let's read this. I'm going to ask Kelly, could you read chapter 34? You okay to read 34? Verse 1 through to 15. Kelly, that would be you.
I'm sorry, I was having a chat with Cam about
descendants. Well, when I said, "Are you right to read it?" and you were nodding, were you actually?
I was talking to Cam.
Well, that is actually quite funny. So, chapter 34, 1 to 15. That was just coincidental.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Sorry, we're having a good old gas bag about what you're saying. All good. I've got it here. So the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Command the people of Israel and say to them, when you enter the land of Canaan, this is the land that shall fall to you for an inheritance, the land of Canaan as defined by its borders. Your south side, shall be from the wilderness of Zin alongside Edom, and your southern border shall run from the end of the salt sea on the east, and your border shall turn south of the ascent of Akrabim and cross to Zin, and its limit shall be south of Kadesh Barnea Then it shall go on to Hazar Adar and pass along Asmon. And the border shall turn from Asmon to the brook of Egypt, and its limits shall be at the sea. For the western border you shall have the great sea and its coast. This shall be your western border. This shall be your northern border. From the great sea you shall draw a line to Mount Hor. From Mount Hor you shall draw a line to Lebo Hamath, and the limit of the border shall be at Zedad. Then the border shall extend to Ziphron, and its limit shall be at Hazarzin. This shall be the northern border. You shall draw a line for your eastern border from Hazarzin to Shepham, and the border shall go down from Shepham to Riblah on the east side of Ain, and the border shall go down and reach to the shoulder of the sea of Chinnereth on the east, and the border shall go down, I said that wrong, it should be Chinnereth on the east, and the border shall go down to the Jordan, and its limit shall be at the Salt Sea. This shall be your land as defined by its borders all around. Moses commanded the people of Israel, saying, this is the land that you shall inherit by lot, which the Lord has commanded to give to the 9 tribes and to the half tribe. For the tribe of the people of Reuben by fathers' houses, and the tribe of the people of Gad by their fathers' houses have received their inheritance, and also the half tribe of Manasseh. The 2 tribes and the half tribe have received their inheritance beyond the Jordan east of Jericho towards the sunrise.
Thank you very much, Kelly. So what Kelly did there was a bit of an awkward portion, but she defined the land of Israel. That word you were saying, Hinnereth, is actually the Sea of Galilee. So essentially, he drew this border around the Sea of the Mediterranean Sea with the full border on the western side of the nation of Israel. The Jordan River is the full eastern border on the eastern side of that portion of land. And then he just really defined the top and the bottom through a few boundaries. But he's saying that's the land. Notice he didn't say anything on the eastern side beyond the Jordan. And yet that's part of the land that the tribe of Reuben, the tribe of Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh were to take up. Now, this is defined here in the Torah. Moses then gives Joshua the task of taking that land. Obviously, there's people in the land. Normally, you'd go in and negotiate and purchase. That was not the case here. This was now you've got to go in and remove them forcibly from the land and that they think is their land. And, if I was a Canaan, I would be defending it as well. Leon, you've got a quick question?
Yeah, I have. Quick. Is that land to the east where the 2.5 tribe, the 2 tribes didn't want to go in, they wanted to stay out there, and he sent another half tribe to keep them honest?
Well, that's it. So it's in current day Jordan. It's the Golan Heights and down on the Transjordan area of what's now known as the Kingdom of Jordan. That's correct, but that wasn't defined as the boundary of the nation of Israel. We didn't get to it when we were talking about Pinchas. There is a portion that's in between Pinchas and what we're talking about now, which describes a little bit more about the tribes. But essentially, you can look at the previous video for that one. But he gives Joshua and Eleazar, the high priest, because Aaron has died now, he gives them the job to go and designate those boundaries according to the lot. We talked about that in Pinchas. And the tribes of Reuben and Gad, half tribe of Manasseh, they were making claim to land that was not in that portion. And so in that description. So the Bible tells us that Messiah is tied to the land of Israel. I think there's not many here that would not believe that. The Messiah comes to bring the people of Israel back to the physical land of Israel. It's one of the major responsibilities of the Messiah when he returns, is to bring the children of Israel en masse back into the nation. In the physical Israel, restore the kingdom of Israel to within the borders of the land. Then his kingdom will extend across those borders, and he will actually rule across how much? The whole world. Okay, so that's all. So that's the Messiah's territory will be the kingdom of Israel and the nations. And so the importance of the Holy Land is found in the ultimate purpose of Messiah. So when you see this is all as a foreshadow, Jesus is going to come to make full sense of these boundaries. So he'll bring the Jewish people back into the land. He'll set up that temple, as we've said before, and he will apportion it out to the children of Israel. We saw last time Pinchas, go back, watch the video, the land breakup of all the tribes is sort of an equal breakup for the tribes there. And we saw that in the book of Ezekiel. Now, what's interesting here is we go on and we start to look at certain leaders are appointed over the land, but then I want to get on to the cities of the Levites. So let's have a look and ask, Jay, could you read Numbers chapter 35, verse 1 to 8? And we're going to look at a little video after that.
Okay. Numbers 35, 1 to 8. While Israel was camped beside the Jordan on the plains of Moab across from Jericho, the Lord said to Moses, "Command the people of Israel to give the Levites from their property certain towns to live in, along with the surrounding pasture lands. These towns will be for the Levites to live in, and their surrounding lands will provide pasture for their cattle, flocks, and other livestock. The pasture land assigned to the Levites around these towns will extend 1,500 feet or 1,000 cubits from the town walls in every direction. Measure off 2,000 cubits outside the town walls in every direction, with the town at the center. This area will serve as the larger pasture land for the towns. 6 of the towns you give the Levites will be cities of refuge, where a person who has accidentally killed someone can flee for safety. In addition, give them 42 other towns. In all, 48 towns with surrounding pasture land will be given to the Levites. These towns will come from the property of the people of Israel. The larger tribes will give more towns to the Levites, while the smaller tribes will give them fewer. Each tribe will give property in proportion to the size of its land."
Is that the end of verse 8?
That's the end of verse 8.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, let's go. Let's have a look at this because there's a lovely little video on our website. Let me share. This is on the Massei page. This is sort of some of the resources you get on the Torah portion page. Can you see that? Or just get someone, Dean, or someone just say yes. You're viewing that. Dean, I can't see you, Dean. Just say yes if you can see that. Someone say yes if you can see that.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Dean. All right, so this is on you go to this page, the Torah portion, and you find the page Massei, and then you come down here and you'll find all these resources here. But we're going to look at this one here, and let's have a look at that.
There's a lot of counting and measuring, distributing of land and tallying of distance and people in Massei, the last chapter in Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, which makes sense when you think about it. After 40 years wandering from campsite to campsite, from springs to date palms, from wilderness to desert and back again, the Israelites who went forth from Egypt are about to reach their destination. Here in Massei, God gives Moses detailed boundaries that lay out exactly where the Israelites will live when they actually arrive in the land. Each of the 12 tribes are assigned hefty chunks of land. One tribe, however, is left out of the plans, and that's the Levites. The Levites are teachers, judges, construction workers. They're an urban bunch. They're more comfortable amidst the buzz of the crowds on a street than the fields of a farm. God wants them to focus on studying and learning and the work of the temple and doesn't want to burden them with land ownership. City planners have always believed that people's well-being and the harmony of communities are deeply affected by their physical environments. So, instead of giving the Levites a chunk of land, God asks each tribe to give 4 cities within each of its states to the Levites. 12 tribes with 4 Levite cities each, that's a total of 48 cities. There, the Levites will live the urban life, rent-free, while the other tribe leaders get the satisfaction of doing a kind and generous act for an honored group. The Levites are to be the ultimate role models for this new nation, respected and looked to for advice. They're supposed to teach and set the tone of good living through good ethics and wisdom. The Torah insists that, as teachers, the Levites be treated as serious VIPs. We're not allowed to forget how important the teacher is in shaping our society. The Levites will focus on studying and guiding the nation through words of the Torah. And this is when the real city planning kicks in. Each of the 48 Levite cities are models of great design, spirituality, and urban harmony. These are places where one might easily run into neighbors on the street, hear the latest news, shop, go to school, study, all within easy walking distance. Around each of the urban centers sits a ring of open land, ideal for reflecting, thinking, and smelling the roses. This park-like space extends in all directions from the city to create a ring around it. Away from the hustle and bustle of the city, no work takes place here. A great place to take a walk on Shabbat. Beyond that, the Torah states, is another ring of land, just for farms, vineyards, and grazing land for animals, where there's room for grapes to supply all the wine needed for festivals, blessings, or a last-minute sacrifice, and enough space for fields to supply food for all the people living in the city, all close by and organized. In other words, a utopian community. A model society for the respected tribe of Levites, the teachers and learned ones. Even when you don't pay rent in physical money, you still have to hold up your end of the bargain. If the rest of the tribes are to look up to the Levites, then the Levites have to be continued to be worthy of being looked up to. To help in maintaining their spiritual elevation, the Levites are spared from worrying about owning and caring for land. And in return, everyone else is able to come, hang out, learn, and offer up sacrifices on the Levites' home turf. The Levites are set up in well-thought-out cities with just the right mix of living space, parkland, and farmland. This journey through the urban jungle takes us out of the wilderness of Bamidbar. Stay tuned for the next episode when we crack open Devarim and shift gears from numbers to words. Chazak, chazak, v'nit hazek. Be strong, and may we be strengthened.
There we go. So that is the Levites city. The Levite cities. Who enjoyed that? Got a bit of an understanding of what a Levite city looks like. So that's going to save me a whole lot of time in just teaching that, because I did such a good job about that. Any questions?
Greg, to me,
Yes,
it's John here. That to me looks like a really good video to show the kids that I teach at school. Am I able to download that?
Yep. You of course you can, or you can play it straight off the website. So yes, you can. Either one of the above. It's you can go to the website, and I think you might be able to download it from there or share it.
Yeah, I'd have to put it on a USB stick to take it into school.
Yeah, I'm with you. You can have a go at that, but yes, it is a great video. The whole of our Torah portion website's full of videos like that for kids and for adults. I don't know about you, but I didn't have to be a kid to enjoy that one. I like that one. Any other questions or comments? Okay, you got an idea now that the Levites are spread through the land to saturate the land with the Torah. It's a brilliant plan. They saturate it. Now, out of those 48 cities, there were 42 that were normal cities, but then there were 6 cities that were considered, who knows what they're going to be, where are we going with this? Yes, Leon.
They're going to be the cities of refuge for those who are charged with manslaughter.
Right, okay, so this is the cities of refuge. So let's have a look at the cities of refuge as we continue on our journey through the Torah. And let's read this. This is chapter 35, verse 9. And let's get, Michelle, you're a good, quick, clear reader. Let's go through. Oh, Michelle, I think you can do the whole section. Chapter 9 through to 34. Listen, everybody, and get your questions ready as she reads this, and then we'll just explain the cities of refuge and what is known as the Blood Avenger. And I'm going to say it in that way so that you know that this is like a Marvel superhero, Blood Avenger. Okay, go, Michelle.
The Amplified. And the Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall select cities to be cities of refuge for you, that the slayer who kills any person unintentionally and unawares may flee there. And the cities shall be to you for a refuge for the Avenger, from the Avenger, that the manslayer may not die until he has had a fair trial before the congregation. And of the cities which you give there shall be your 6 cities for refuge. You shall give 3 cities on the east side of the Jordan and 3 cities in the land of Canaan to be cities of refuge. These 6 cities shall be a refuge for the Israelites and for the stranger and the temporary resident among them, that anyone who kills any person unintentionally and unawares may flee there. But if he struck him down with an instrument of iron so that he died, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death. And if he struck him down by throwing a stone, by which a person may die, and he died, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death. Or if he struck him down with a weapon of wood in his hand, by which one may die, and he died, the offender is a murderer. He shall surely be put to death. The avenger of blood shall himself slay the murderer. When he meets him, he shall slay him. But if he stabbed him through hatred or hurled at him by lying in wait, so that he died, or in enmity struck him down with his hand so that he died, he that smote him shall surely be put to death. He is a murderer. The avenger of blood shall slay the murderer when he meets him. But if he stabbed him suddenly without enmity, or threw anything at or upon him without lying in wait, or with any stone with which a man may be killed, not seeing him, and threw it at him so that he died, and was not his enemy, nor sought to harm him, then the congregation shall judge between the slayer and the avenger of blood according to these ordinances. And the congregation shall rescue the manslayer from the hand of the avenger of blood, and restore him to his city of refuge to which he had fled. And he shall live in it until the high priest dies, who was anointed with the sacred oil. But if the slayer shall at any time come outside the limits of his city of refuge to which he has fled, and the avenger of blood finds him outside the limits of his city of refuge and kills the manslayer, he shall not be guilty of blood. Because the manslayer should have remained in his city of refuge until the death of the high priest. But after the high priest's death, the manslayer shall return to the land of his possession, and these things shall be for a statute and an ordinance to you throughout your generations in all your dwellings. Whoever kills any person intentionally, the murderer shall be put to death on the testimony of witnesses, but no one shall be put to death on the testimony of one witness. Moreover, you shall take no ransom for the life of a murderer guilty of death, but he shall surely be put to death. And you shall accept no ransom for him who has fled to his city of refuge, so that he may return to dwell in the land before the death of the high priest. So you shall not pollute the land in which you live, for blood pollutes the land, and no atonement can be made for the land for the blood shed in it, but the blood of him who shed it. And you shall not defile the land in which you live, in the midst of which I dwell, for I, the Lord, dwell in the midst of the people of Israel.
Thanks so much, Michelle. So clearly and quickly read. That was just wonderful. So here is the introduction of these things called cities of refuge. And there was to be 6 of these cities, 3 on the western side, basically in Israel proper, and then 3 on the eastern side, which is where the tribes of Gad, Reuben, half tribe of Manasseh were to be. And you might say, well, okay, there's 9.5 tribes on one side, 2.5 on the other. Why would both sides get 3? You know, there's obviously the rabbis say that it was just a more violent place over on the other side with idol worship, blah blah blah. So anyway, this is an interesting one. Let me show you where these cities are. So this is here's the cities here. I'll just open it up here. And I don't know if you can see that. That's still quite small. But anyway, you'll see Kadesh, Shechem. We know Shechem well. We know Hebron well. They're refuge cities. And Golan, Ramoth Gilead, that's the Golan Heights actually today. It's town Golan there. Ramoth Gilead and Bezer. They're the ones. So they're the 6 refuge cities. Essentially, if someone is guilty of killing someone accidentally, manslaughter, as Leon said, then they could flee to these cities. Let me just read this. Maimonides points out that the people of Israel established 6 cities of refuge as Moses commanded, but they never added an additional 3 to bring the full number up to 9. Now, where do we get that? Let me just see if I can find that here. Okay, Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 8. We're not there yet in our readings, but I'll just read it anyway. Now, if the Lord your God enlarges your territory. So if the Lord your God enlarges your territory, it's an interesting thought. If he does, like, does he or doesn't he? As he swore to your fathers and gives you the land which he promised to give to your fathers. Bear in mind that the boundaries that were set by Moses at this part of the Torah are not the size that he promised to Abraham. So there's an extended size of the land of Israel that was promised to Abraham. So this is where this comes in. As he swore to your fathers and gives you the land which he promised to give to your fathers, if you keep all these commands and do them, in other words, you give me reason to keep you in the land, which I command you today, to love the Lord your God and walk in his ways, then you shall add 3 more cities for yourself besides these 3. So if you enlarge your property, you'll get 3 more cities. Now, there's lots of thought and discussion that could come out of that one statement, isn't there? But I'm not going to go into that. Maimonides says, as I said there before, they never in their time added an additional 3. Never. Never has that additional 3 been added to make the number up to 9. But he cites this as one of the primary proofs from the Torah for the coming of Messiah. Wow. Did you hear that? Did you hear that from a rabbi? That this has not been yet fulfilled, which is a primary proof that the Messiah, when he comes, will set up 3 more refuge cities. Now, refuge cities are for people accidentally killing each other. So what does that indicate? In the Messianic era, there is a requirement for 3 extra refuge cities because people will accidentally kill each other throughout the Messianic era. Let's not go there because that will open up a whole lot of storing, a lot of thought there. I can tell. I won't look, but I bet you Kelly's thinking about this. she'll be thinking hard on that one. Maimonides also says in Hilchot Melachim 11:2, similarly in regard to the cities of refuge, it says, if your Lord your God, that's what I've just said. That's where that came from. So it's reserved for the Messianic era. In the kingdom, the Lord will so enlarge the boundaries of Israel that 3 more cities of refuge will be added there. So we've talked about that. All right, so now let's talk about this blood avenger. So what exactly is this? What happens is that if, let's just say somebody accidentally killed someone. Now, he goes through, as Michelle read, the iron, the stones, the wood implements. If they're able to kill, then they're considered a weapon. They're considered that you intended to do that. But if it was an accidental thing, if an Israelite was out mowing his lawn with his electric mower and it's kicked up a stone and hit his neighbor in the head and killed him, then that's an accidental murder. It's not even murder. It's like he killed him accidentally. What's going to happen? Well, in the Middle East in these days, and by the way, Africa today, if you kill someone, you keep driving until you got far enough so that you're not immediately attacked and killed. In many places, and certainly where we were ministering in Mozambique, that's what happened. You actually knock someone over in the car. Don't stop. Now, that would be our natural reaction. Stop and help the person right there and then. Just take some time to get ahead, then work out how you're going to help, because the first response is like this blood avenger, as it was in the Middle East in these days, is that you'll die. You'll die very quickly. So the laws of the cities of refuge include this concept of what's called, what did yours call it, Michelle? It wasn't blood avenger. What was it? It was called manslayer or something, or no, was it manslayer or
manslayer?
No, manslayer was the person who killed. What was the other one? The avenger. What did you? I can't remember what yours said.
I've got Avenger of Blood in mine.
Avenger of Blood. Well, we call it the blood avenger.
Oh yeah, the Avenger.
And so this was a common. So the person who avenged the blood. This was before systems of justice and courts and things like this. Blood vendettas were a socially accepted form of justice. So they kept murder in check by this cultural institution called, in Hebrew, Goel Ha'adam, which is the redeemer of blood or blood avenger. And so it indicates that vengeance is a part of the biblical concept of redemption. And we're going to see that that's actually the case. We think that God's not into revenge or vengeance. In actual fact, we find out, in fact, he is, because we find out that the blood cries out. The blood cries out for revenge. You know, we find in the book of Revelation, those martyrs underneath the throne that cry out, says, well, when will you avenge us, Lord? And he says, wait, just wait. My vengeance, or my return on what's been done, the merit for merit, the measure for measure system of justice that God operates by, will take place at some point. So vengeance is part of the biblical concept of redemption. And Goel Mia is a redeemer. So we've got two things here. We've got the Goel Hadam, which is the redeemer of the blood, and we've got a Goel Mia, which is the redeemer. And so in this case, the redeemer is a kinsman responsible for redeeming or avenging family members and protecting the family interests, purchasing family members back from slavery or debt, restoring tribal land and property that's fallen outside the family, even marrying the childless widow of a deceased kinsman in a levirate marriage. So one's redeemer is the next of kin, a brother, a father, an uncle, a man or a woman, or predominantly a man of influence. And another word for it is a kinsman redeemer. Kinsman redeemer. You've probably heard that term before if I put it in that way. And so the tribal justice system, if a man was murdered, his next of kin was expected to avenge the murderer. This is how the justice system worked, to prevent wholesale murder and homicides. So once, you know, the guy's been hit in the head by the mower, the stone, and he's fallen down, what does the guy who was mowing the lawn do? He stops his mower and he runs. Okay, so this is because as long as it takes for the message for that guy's death to reach the family, you've got to realize that at that instant, the blood avenger will be released to go after him. This is the system of justice, to avenge the family of the death. Remember, people back then were, you know, they were the support, the providers, the farmers for the whole family. If someone dies, that's the end of their provision in some ways. So the next of kin was expected to avenge the murderer, the person responsible for the man's death, even if it's accidental, like the Moab incident, you can expect to die. Okay, so Rashi says the avenger of the blood is a kinsman of the murdered victim. And so this system discouraged murder. And he would come to look for you. And I don't know if you've ever seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I don't know if you older guys seen that one where, you know, Butch Cassidy, Paul Newman and Robert Redford were pursued by the posse that just were relentless in trying to track them down. When they think they'd escaped, they kept coming. They hide out someone else, they kept coming. They went down the ravines, they kept coming. They were being followed. And I remember Paul Newman saying, what is it? Who are these guys? Like, we're going across a desert and they're still following us. We go through towns, we go through rivers. In the end, they had to jump off a high waterfall just to try and escape these. That's the blood avenger. He's coming for you. He's coming for you. You never know at what hour. You'll be in your sleep and he'll be standing over you. Your eyes will open up and there's the blood avenger. So you got this idea that you cannot escape this blood avenger. Yes, Kelly. Thanks for interrupting my story, Kelly.
No, I would have waited, but I was just getting ahead ready to slide on in with the question. I'm just curious, these refuge cities, how long did they stay around for, Greg?
How long they stay around for, I don't know, Kelly. There's your
my homework. Just 1 minute.
Yes.
Isn't it until the priest died?
No. That wasn't the question she asked. The question she asked was how long did the refuge cities stay around for, didn't you?
Yeah.
Not how long was the guy have to stay in the city.
Oh yeah, no. How long did this go on for, you know?
Yeah, right. Great question. Leon's got the answer for you, Kelly.
Yeah, we would hope that they're still there because it's still happening.
Say that again, mate. You just broke up at the last minute.
We would hope that those cities are still there because they're going to still need them.
Right, but in relation to what we said earlier about there being 9 refuge cities.
Well, there'll be 3 more, so which tells us that the first 6 are still there.
Yes, well, you can do your homework on that, but there's certainly cities like Shechem, which is current day Nablus. It's well and truly in Palestinian Authority territory. I don't think a Jewish person is going to be running to Shechem or Nablus to escape, to be a city of refuge. In these days, might find themselves that they're not welcome in that city. For those that have been to Israel, that's not where you drive into if you're Jewish. But Hebron, by the way, is exactly the same. Hebron, you wouldn't go to Hebron Jewish, just to walk down the street. So yes, Cam.
You wouldn't want to make a run for it, and you're there a couple of days, and they say, "Well, we're closing down this one this week, so you'll have to make your way somewhere else."
Yeah, right. So let's just have a look at this, because what happens is there were signposts on every major intersection which said and pointed the way to the city of refuge, so that if you suddenly were mowing the lawn and accidentally killed something and you took off, you haven't been thinking for the last 30 years, wonder where the closest refuge city is. But as you're running away as fast as you can, the major intersection you come to next will say refuge city that way, and you just turn and just see how I'm doing this. I'm making out as though I'm running. I'm actually sitting right in my chair, but it looks like I'm just running really fast, because I've got to get to this refuge city. And once you get into the city of refuge, you are safe according to the Torah, according to the law. For them to come in and avenge your blood then would be themselves making them a murderer rather than a blood avenger. And so if the manslayer, that's the person who's committed the manslaughter, accidental manslaughter, at any time goes beyond the border of his city of refuge to which he may flee, and the blood avenger finds him. So in other words, you've been in there 15 years, and you decide, gee, I just want a day out. I'm going out to the park outside the city. Go outside, and the blood avenger, he's there. He's waiting for you, because time doesn't matter to the blood avenger. He's just there behind the tree. He steps out. I gotcha. And so he's allowed to kill you. He, according to this rule here, should have remained inside the city gates. Now, of course, the Torah presents a higher form of justice. We see about that when we're in the Shoftim, which is coming up, where we see the Sanhedrin coming, trial by judges. So in actual fact, if you had committed real murder, then you are to be judged by a court. The court is called the Sanhedrin. I'll just fast track that. A minimum of 23 members in the Sanhedrin, and that is a court of law. There's a high court of law with 72 members. There's the group with 23 minimum, and so decisions can be made. Murder is a capital offense. Kidnapping is a capital offense. But it's noted by the rabbis that there weren't very many people killed for the crime of murder, because there had to be, and we'll read it another time, 2 witnesses. And even if, and I remember listening to Rabbi Gordon on this one, he said, if you saw a man running down the street chasing another man, and he had a knife in his hand, and he was saying, I'm going to kill you, and the other man saying, don't kill me, and they go into a building, and you lose sight of them, and then you hear a scream and and then you see the man with the knife come out with his knife, and it's got blood all over it, and you race into the building and find the man that he was chasing dead inside. He cannot be tried because there was no witness to the actual murder. Therefore, there have been very few capital punishments through the system of the Sanhedrin, as explained by Rabbi Gordon. So anyway, now, why are we painting this big picture of why has God set up refuge cities? Why is all this? It's a foreshadow. It's a foreshadow of the blood avenger, and the Messiah is the kinsman redeemer, the redeemer. And through his suffering and his death, he's accomplished a spiritual redemption. And when he returns, he will accomplish the physical redemption of his people, the ultimate redeemer, who will redeem Israel from exile among the nations. He will gather the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob from the nations and restore them to the land of Israel. And the job of redemption includes blood vengeance. So when the Messiah comes to redeem Israel, he will require recompense of every drop of Jewish blood that has been spilled for the sake of heaven. We'll read about that in a minute. Revelation, perhaps, if I can get who's on there. I don't know, Jasmine, are you up for reading? I can't see your face, or I don't know whether you are. Are you able to read there, or let's see if you're able to read, or Damien, whoever's there? Yeah, muting's not coming off, so I can't see, so I'll presume no. Jen, are you able to read Revelation chapter 6, verse 9 to 11? And we'll just see there how the Messiah is going to avenge the spilled blood of, his disciples, but for Israel. Thanks.
Okay, Revelation chapter 6, verse 9 to 11. When the Lamb broke the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of all who had been martyred for the word of God and for being faithful in their testimony. They shouted to the Lord and said, "O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you judge the people who belong to this world and avenge our blood for what they have done to us?" Then a white robe was given to each of them, and they were told to rest a little longer until the full number of their brothers and sisters, their fellow servants of Jesus, who were to be martyred, had joined them.
Thank you. It's just an indication there's an avenging for the blood of whose blood has been spilt on behalf of Jesus, or behalf of Messiah, behalf of the Lord throughout the history. And Psalm 79:10 says, "Why should the nations say, where their God? Where is their God? Let there be known among the nations in our sight the vengeance for the blood of your servants which has been shed." So there is a day of reckoning. Life doesn't finish at the day that we die, but there is a judgment, and so we need to be aware of that. Isaiah 63:3 is a famous verse. He says, "I have trodden the wine trough alone, and from the peoples there was no man with me. I also trod them in my anger and trampled them in my wrath, and their lifeblood is sprinkled on my garments and stained all my raiment. For the day of vengeance was in my heart, and my year of redemption has come." The Lord also says, "Vengeance is mine and retribution." It's Deuteronomy 32:35 and 35, Isaiah 35:4. And we'll make this our final verse. "Take courage, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. The recompense of God will come, but he will save you." So there's both a warning and a sense of love from the Lord, is that for those who have served him and have perished as a result of their righteousness, said that we will be persecuted for righteousness' sake. Even some have died, and many have actually died. The prophets and many disciples have died in their proclamation of the gospel of Jesus. The Lord says, that is not left undone. The blood actually itself, which has the neshama, the soul or the spirit in it, will cry out. It cries out for vengeance, and the vengeance, the Lord says, is mine. And it will happen. It hasn't happened in this lifetime, but it shall happen. We didn't get quite through the portion of Massei in 2 hours. There's still more to go, but we didn't get through it. And that itself was supposed to be a double portion. Can you imagine adding something to that portion, another portion to that portion, just to let you know how much stuff is in the Torah that we need to know? Anyway, that's it for today. The Lord bless you. Shabbat shalom. Thank you for your time together with me today. I look forward to seeing you next week. I love you very much. We'll see you next week on the Torah portion. God bless you. Bye for now.